Welcome to the House of the Lord's YouTube channel, where you can experience all the dynamic teaching and preaching that happens in the house. Thank you for tuning in, and we pray you are blessed, encouraged, and changed by the word you receive here.
Good evening. Welcome to the Facebook Live edition of the Wednesday evening service of the House of the Lord. These are unprecedented times, so we are gathering during this season to keep you safe where we're not gathering right now so that you would be safe. The situation is so fluid that it's difficult to say what's going to happen, so stay tuned for further announcements about what's going to happen and how we're going to continue to work through these events. For right now, we'll use Facebook Live, and then we'll use live streaming for either Wednesday or Sunday services. This Sunday, I'm planning on streaming at 10:30 a.m. live from our worship center. Just want you to know that most of the money that was raised last Sunday was raised in our church building. It was a solid offering. Thank God for those of you who came out and those of you who responded on the watching the live streaming. This Sunday, we'll test our faithfulness by using online and electronic methods. So I just want to make sure you know what those are. Some of us have automatic withdrawal. Thank you. I'm one of those. You can text THOTL to 77977 and then follow the instructions. Through PushPay on our website, you can go to www.thotl.org/give, or through PushPay on the House of the Lord mobile app. Thanks in advance for your faithfulness. It's interesting, perhaps providential, that we're in this Wednesday series during this crisis. And while social isolation is becoming a growing problem, we're discussing biblical demand of relationships. You know, during the 2019 Counterculture Club teaching, we covered a monumentally important subject entitled The Ethical Demand of Relationships. The issue of relationships, or teaching, that issue was taken from The Ethical Demand of Relationships and another book by a Danish theologian that I had been doing some reading. You know, I read all kinds of stuff. It was very fascinating. But I don't suggest that you get these books because the depth of the philosophy that's being discussed was even heavy for me. But I believe there's some very important teaching that we can take out of that. It was so good, I just couldn't leave it in Counterculture Club. And so I decided to bring it over to Wednesday night. Lokstrup puts forth what he calls the ethical demand, which is from a moral philosophical perspective, is the demand to love one's neighbor, which is incumbent upon every person, whether you are saved or whether you're not. Even though we're going to touch on the philosophical perspective of loving one's neighbor as oneself, we're going to work primarily upon the biblical demand, not the ethical demand. This teaching is found in one commandment and one phrase: you shall love your neighbor as yourself. Well, we've surveyed, for those of you that have been coming on Wednesday night, and now you have the opportunity, even if you haven't been coming on Wednesday night, to check in and see what we've been doing. We've surveyed and overviewed the 8 places that phrase comes up in the Bible. How many of you know that if God says something one time, it's important, but 8 times it has come up in the Bible, it comes up, so you know that that's very important. Recently, we began to talk about the implications of that divine command, of that principle, and then touch on Lokstrup's ethical demand. We've been picking out the excerpts from his particular book, and we continue that practice tonight. Lokstrup's analysis is based upon a phenomenological study, but it's backed up by psychology, it's backed up by psychiatry. Remember, I'm not reading the 8 places where where this phrase comes up, because we've already done that and talked about each one and taught on each one. And now we're getting into the philosophical perspectives of that. Phenomenology is based on subjective experiences that can be apprehended by human senses. So lots of teaching that we open ourselves up and we demonstrate an expectation of trust whenever we interact with anyone flows from his observation of human experiences, his belief in the divine command of the Bible. For instance, the analysis of a child's life affirms Logos' thesis that trust is a basic human feeling. It's what he calls an expression of life. Trust is fundamental to life. Life cannot be lived without trust. Furthermore, trust is an expression of life. Trust expresses the true essence of life. So beyond the information that we receive from our senses, he points out the investigation and how they are undergirded by philosophy and how they're undergirded by psychology and psychiatry. Let me give you a quote. Having clearly shown how a child's life may be permanently determined by the manner in which adults behave towards him or her. For example, one might mention a parent's ambitious pride in relation to their children. In the ambiguity of everyday living, this is regarded as very commendable. But humanly speaking, it is to the detriment of the children because it can result in an upbringing which deprives them, perhaps forever, of something of paramount importance, namely joy in living and the courage to be. End of quote. Once again, the material is so thick that I'm going to slow down and I'm going to take it kind of phrase by phrase and work our way down into it. A child's life is permanently determined by the way in which adults behave towards him or her. The child imitates, according to Gerard, the desires of the adults around him or her, and then follows their model. We want to transmit caution, but not craziness to our children concerning the novel coronavirus. I remember, and probably some of you do too, the drills that we used to go through in case of a nuclear blast. I don't think they prepared us for the nuclear blast. They brought all kinds of fear and apprehension into our lives. And today, some of us are still reliving some of that. The author uses the example of a parent demonstrating ambitious pride in relation to their children, being overtly proud of the child and ambitiously wanting the child to progress. Now, this is a little old, but it really comes into play in the modern world in which we live. In the ambiguity of everyday living, for everyday living has a quality of ambiguity to it. This kind of pride can be detrimental to children because it deprives them, maybe forever, of something of paramount importance. They need the joy of living. They need the courage to become whatever it is that God has created them to become. And these children will never experience that joy or that courage because their parents are living their lives for them, not allowing them to grow, not allowing them to become who God created them to be. But why does this kind of ambitious pride have a potential detrimental impact upon children? Let me give you another quote. This is due not least of all to the fact that the child, in contradistinction to an adult, is never able to trust only partially. To trust with reservation is possible only for one who has learned to hold back something of him or herself. But the child has not learned consciously or deliberately to do so. For him or her, reservation takes place as a matter of psychic, he calls it automatism, or automatically. That's why the disappointed trust, the restlessness, the insecurity which go with it create in the child far-reaching fateful consequences. So this ambitious pride that a lot of parents have in America can be detrimental because children don't know how to trust partially. And since they can't trust partially, they trust their parents' ambitious pride as something that is good and wholesome. They don't know anything else. And to trust with reservation is possible only for those of us who have learned to hold back something of ourselves in every interaction. Children have not learned consciously or deliberately to hold themselves back. And so with reservation, it takes place when they do reserve themselves automatically. It's not purposely. They don't sit there like adults and say, I'm not going to trust you. But they must respond automatically to pain and to disappointment. And so when children experience disappointed trust and insecurity, it creates in them devastating consequences. So even as a child can be permanently damaged through interaction with parents, so every person can be permanently damaged when their unconscious expectations of trust, of their communication, their openness, their self-revelation is scorned and abused. We started to talk about this last Wednesday. We start to really get down into it. I know this is going to be difficult for some because we don't want to take responsibility. We don't want to deal with our perspective of how we impact other people. We are Americans. We are individualists. We feel like I'm doing my thing, you do your thing. But the Bible gives us a different kind of picture. A picture of the impact of relationships upon one another. Let me give you another quote. A person never has something to do with another person without also having some degree of control over him or her. It may be a very small matter involving only a passing mood, a dampening or a quickening of the spirit, a deepening or a removal of some dislike. But it may also be a matter of tremendous scope, such as can determine if life of the other flourishes or whether they're not going to flourish. End of quote. When we interact with another person, we started talking about this last week, and we trust the gift of that communication. For those of you who have not been with us, that means anytime I talk to somebody, I'm trusting that they're going to respond to me. When I trust that communication in mimetic rivalry, and they end up imitating us and following our suggestions, then it's a way of having influence over the other person. Somehow I'm influencing them, controlling them by having a certain level of interaction. We are interacting back and forth in such a dynamic fashion that is having impact. I got an excellent example of this. You're quite well aware of it. We have exerted an influence on one another. Do you know where? To buy toilet paper. Somebody told me that they were standing in the supermarket and watching people buy toilet paper, and they decided, I'm going to buy some too, since they're buying it. And so mimetic rivalry, that is watching other people, imitating them, interacting with people, caused a certain level of control that people who didn't even go into the grocery store to buy toilet paper, who don't even need toilet paper, bought rolls of toilet paper, and some people start fighting over the toilet paper because they saw that somebody else had it. So the influence or the degree of control could be a small matter, just to buying toilet paper, but it can have tremendous scope. It can have determinative power. And the influence may involve a passing mood, a dampening or quickening spirit, deepening or removal or some dislike, yet it can have scope much greater than that. We may be imitating something greater. If my child imitates my depressiveness, he or she may be and may deal with depression all their lives. It doesn't dawn on us, and it doesn't dawn on the child where they picked that up, where they imitated it, where they got it from. When I think about my life, remember, I have choices within certain contexts, within certain constructs. I didn't choose my parents. I can't choose where I was born, but I can choose what I do with my life within that context. But my parents' attitudes were linked to learning. Both of them like to learn. And today, I believe in lifelong learning. I probably have imitated some of that from my parents. They had tremendous impact, influence. Logstrup calls it control. I like it to call it influence. Our interaction, if you're missing this, let me underline it, break it down, get to the bottom line of this particular this portion. Our interaction with others is critical and it is powerful. Unfortunately, unconsciously, we nonetheless have the strange notion, particularly in America, that we are not a part of the other person's world. We have the curious idea that a person constitutes his own world. And we have no part of it, only to touch upon it every now and then. And so that's the reason we act the way we act in America. I'm not responsible for you. I'm not doing anything to you. I'm not having any particular impact or control over you. I'm living my life. You're living your life. They may intersect accidentally every now and then, but that's between you and God. I don't have anything to do with it. But right now, we're beginning to see the tremendous impact that we have upon one another. And this impact allows us, because it brings about certain realities, but because we are American, America allows us to absolve ourselves of relational responsibility to love our neighbor, which is ever incumbent upon us. We can easily say, well, I love my neighbor, but I'm not going to do this. I love my neighbor, but I'm not going to do that, because I don't take responsibility. I don't understand the impact that I'm having upon other people. Now, right now, because of social distancing, we are moving from social distancing to social isolation. We're beginning to see the importance of fellowshipping with people. I've tried to say this to several people. They couldn't hear me. We're concerned about, well, we don't want anybody to lose their life. Well, of course not. We don't want anybody to lose their life. But we don't want anybody to lose their mind either. We don't want anybody to lose their soul either. We don't want anybody to lose who they are, because social isolation may bring about some stuff where people are, they made it through the crisis, but they're poor for it because they don't have the emotional, psychological health that they need. And so they're starting to talk about this on TV. It took a little while for us to get there, but now we're starting to talk about that. We're starting to talk about how do we keep our minds? How do we keep from losing our mind? How do we stay encouraged? Because if you're not interacting with people, God created you to do that, then there's going to be something. Somebody said relationships are everything. I stole it from Clinton. And now I've made it mine. People think I came up with it. I didn't come up with it. Clinton actually said it. But you know how we do, those of us who are preachers. The first time I quote Clinton, next time he is a counselor, psychologist. The next time I said somebody said, and the third time I say, as I always say. And so I just say relationships are everything so much. They said, well, Bishop coined that. I didn't coin it. But I am using it because it is true. It is true at the highest degree, at the deepest level. And the longer I live, the more true I find it to be. Well, we end our teaching today with several quotes. Let me give you the next one. Through the trust which a person either shows or asks of another person, he or she surrenders something of his or her life to that person. Therefore, our existence demands of us that we protect the life of the person who has placed his or her trust in us. Remember last week we talked about every time you talk to somebody, you're placing a certain level of trust in that person, because you're trusting. I'm not talking about a deep interpersonal trust, but a civic trust, a civil trust. You are trusting them to respond to you. If you weren't trusting them to respond to you, you wouldn't even talk to them, because you would be afraid that there was something else was going to happen. They were going to abuse you. So you have some minor level of trust in people, and therefore that demands that we protect the lives of people who take the choice to interact with us and to place their lives in our hand. Now remember what I said. We don't believe their life is in our hand. We believe that their life is in God's hand, and we just happen to interact with them now and then. But when we trust another person by communicating with him or her, and when we are asked to trust the communication of another person, in both cases, each person surrenders something of his or her life to the other person. Therefore, our existence, our life, demands of us that we protect the life of the person who has placed his or her trust in us. That is what Logstrom's book is about. He calls it the ethical demand. It is ethical that we trust and that we protect the trust of people who choose to talk to us and to interact with us, because we can have tremendous impact upon their well-being by how we respond to them. I hope you're getting a little bit of this. I hope some of it's coming through. Remember, this is based upon the divine command, which is you shall love your neighbor as yourself. But Lokstrup is discussing the ethical demand, because he says, even if you're not saved, you have been created by God, and he has placed something down inside of you and in your conscience to be able to know that how you ought to respond towards people, even though you may not have teaching, even though you may not be a part of the church. You know somewhere down inside of you that you are responsible, that you should respond to your fellow man and fellow woman in a way that would bring love and peace and joy and perspective. All right. Lobstrom continues. I'm just quoting some final quotes to just kind of summarize what we've been talking about. He quotes, in any event, trust means that in every encounter between human beings, there is an unarticulated demand, irrespective of the circumstances in which the encounter takes place and irrespective of the nature of the encounter. So there is an ethical demand, but the ethical demand is unarticulated. People don't walk up to you and say, now I'm about to talk to you and I'm expecting you to hear what I have to say. I'm about to talk to you, and I want you to treat what I'm going to say with great trust, with great integrity. They don't say that to you. It's unarticulated. And perhaps that is why we have such trouble, because it is unarticulated. Then I'm sometimes not on my guard. I'm not aware of the power of the interaction that we're having. We all have talked to somebody, interacted with somebody, and hurt them. We all have been hurt because we have attempted to talk to somebody, to share with them. And it was so important, but they didn't understand the importance of what it is that you were saying or what it is that you were doing. Another quote, regardless of how varied the communication between persons may be, it always involves risk of one person daring to lay him or herself open to the other in hope of a response. Communication, it's so hard. It's so difficult. I try to share with so many people. I try to help as many as I can. I try to give them this teaching, but communication always involves risk. Anytime you choose to talk to anybody, it is a risk. So that risk is going to be disappointed, unrewarded at times. Don't give up. Don't quit. Why? Because there's going to be somebody who's going to respond. Maybe few and far in between. Maybe that's why Shakespeare said, if you have one friend, consider yourself to be lucky. I wouldn't consider it lucky. I consider it blessed. But our expectations may be too high of people in America who have not been taught, who have no perspective, and where the individuality drives them in the opposite direction. So the question becomes, why would anybody operate that way? Why do we walk up and talk to people? Why do we take the risk? Another quote, trust is not of our own making, it is given. Our life is so constituted that it cannot be lived except as one person lays himself or herself open to another person and puts him or herself into that person's hands, either by showing or claiming trust. The reason we do it is because life can't be lived any other way. Any other way, it would not be relational. Any other way, it would not be a fellowship. Any other way, it would not be us interacting with. It would be us operating in a vacuum by ourselves. We try it, but it won't work because it'll make you sick, because you were created for a relationship with God, created for a relationship with others, created God and who he is. So relationality is the essence of living. Relationships are everything. And by our very attitude to one another, we help to shape one another's world. We can become stronger. We can become more loving by being shaped by interacting with one another. As it has been said, distrust is a deficient form of trust. You either trust or you don't. But even then, that's a deficient form of trust. Well, I want to thank you for tuning in tonight. I'm not going to go as long as I do in church because you can't see me. I can't transmit the exact same energy as it is when we meet together. No wonder the writer of the Hebrews said, forsake not the assembling of ourselves together as the manner of some is. And so we're not going to forsake ourselves, but we have to do this in order to keep you safe for right now. But as soon as we possibly can, we'll get back together so that the power of our relationships can make itself known unto us. But right now it's offering time. And so I heard you clapping and shouting right then when I said it's offering time. Here are some ways that you can be aware to give again. So, you know, some of us have automatic withdrawal. And I want to encourage those of you who have the faith to do that, to go ahead and do that. That's what I'm doing. That's what my family's doing. Text THOTL to 77977 and then follow the instructions. Through PushPay on our website, www.thotl.org/give. Through PushPay on the House of the Lord mobile app. We want to make you aware of that. We're going to make our affirmation in a minute, but I got a little bit more news for you about what we're doing. We realize that not everybody is social media savvy. They don't have internet, or everybody doesn't have Wi-Fi capabilities or a computer, or everybody doesn't have a smartphone. Today I was working with a gentleman that had to come to our church and do some work, and he had a flip phone, so he didn't have a smartphone. These persons, however, are dear to us. They deserve our best efforts to keep them and to make them feel that they are a vital part of the House of the Lord family. And so with the hard work of Pastor Darren Brake and Sister Angela Gibbons, a method has been created that can keep our seniors and people beyond our church connected to the worship services on Wednesday and Sunday evening. More specifically, a toll-free dial-in number with a corresponding passcode or PIN has been established for those who want to hear the worship services. We believe that this to be much simpler method for those who are not well versed with Facebook or YouTube or websites or apps or all of that. I know most people assume everybody's got that. Well, everybody doesn't, and not all of the seniors do. So to make this effective, we need your help, because we're going to need you to get the word out for people who are not on this particular broadcast or this streaming or this Facebook Live. And so in order to do that, you need to share that with other people. And the information is, there's a phone number, and I'm sure we're going to be able to get that to you, but it's 1-425-436-6378. There's a passcode or a PIN, 14221. And what they're going to do is the Wednesday services will be ready to hear at 9 p.m. So we have it at 7. They're going to be able to process it, put it on together, and you can call in and hear it at 9 p.m. Wednesday morning or Sunday morning service will be ready to be heard at 12 p.m. And then from Monday and Tuesday and Thursday through Saturday, messages will be ready to hear at 10 a.m., 2 p.m., and 6 p.m. We're going to get that information to those people who need it as best we can. So right now, I'm going to ask you to go ahead and get ready to give your offering. And you know how we do it at the House of the Lord. We got to make this affirmation. Well, I got a new one for you that will line up with where we are right now. Are you ready to go? Come on now. Are you ready to go? As we give today's offering, we are believing the Lord for discernment, protection from infection, deliverance from fear, deliverance from fear of social isolation, job security, grocery resources, medical resources, psychological resources, unemployment resources, spiritual resources. Give us, Lord, concern for others, trust in you, emotional peace, spiritual peace, a commitment to prayer, healing, and divine health. It's offering time. Come on and make a hallelujah unto God Almighty. He is worthy. Last time, we were last Sunday, I told you, I said, come on, get up and shout where you are. But you didn't have any shouting music, so we're going to have to see if we can get you some shouting music. So that you can shout at home where you are right now. God is a mighty God, and he is an awesome God. And even though we're going through what we're going through, he's worthy to be praised. So I want you to get up on your feet right now where you are and exercise yourself while you're at home. Isn't he good? God bless you. Have a good night. Trust in the Lord. He is worthy of praise.